My grandfather's lawyer cleared his throat and read the most bizarre will anyone had ever heard. My entire $500 million fortune goes to whoever finds the golden key. My cousin Bryce immediately stood up and shouted, "I'll tear this whole state apart if I have to." But while everyone scrambled for treasure maps and metal detectors, I knew Grandpa Cornelius better than that. He wasn't playing games, he was teaching one final lesson that would end with me calling 911 from inside a bank vault. The morning they read Grandpa's will, 47 members of the Ashford family packed into the conference room of Quinton & Associates law firm in downtown Milwaukee. The October rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the air conditioning was fighting a losing battle against the heat of that many bodies crammed into one space. I can still smell the mixture of expensive cologne, nervous sweat, and the leather of those ancient chairs that probably cost more than my college tuition. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college with a degree in education like my father. I'd taken a spot in the back corner, pressed between my parents. My father, Dennis, sat with his hands folded, wearing the same brown sport coat he'd worn to every family gathering for the past decade. My mother, Grace, held my hand, her wedding ring cool against my palm. We were the poor relations, the ones who usually got mentioned in Christmas cards but rarely got invited to the family compound unless it was mandatory. Across the room sat Uncle Harlan, my father's older brother, the one who'd joined Grandpa Cornelius in the pharmaceutical business straight out of Harvard Business School. His Armani suit probably cost more than my father made in a month as a high school science teacher. Uncle Harlan kept checking his phone, muttering about missing important meetings for this. His wife, my Aunt Veronica, sat beside him with perfect posture, her diamond necklace catching the light every time she breathed. Their son Bryce, my cousin who was 2 years older than me, lounged in his chair like he owned the place. He'd been groomed since birth to take over the family empire. Grandpa always said I had the killer instinct for business, he'd told anyone who'd listen at the funeral 3 days ago. He said I reminded him of himself at my age. Bryce had this way of making every conversation feel like a competition he was winning. His sister Mallory sat next to him, her phone propped against her designer purse, live-streaming the whole event to her 200,000 followers. "You guys, this is literally history in the making," she whispered to her camera. "The Ashford family fortune is about to be distributed, and your girl has a front row seat." She'd built her entire influencer career on being pharmaceutical royalty, doing sponsored posts from the family's various estates. The lawyer, Mr. Quinton, stood at the head of the conference table. He was a small man with thick glasses who'd been handling Grandpa's affairs since before I was born. His hands shook slightly as he held the will. Whether from age or nervousness, I couldn't tell. Behind him hung a portrait of Grandpa Cornelius, painted just last year before the cancer diagnosis. Even in oil paint, his eyes seemed to twinkle with the secret knowledge that had made him millions. "Before we begin," Mr. Quinton said, adjusting his glasses, "Mr. Ashford left specific instructions that every family member must be present for the reading. I've been asked to wait until everyone has arrived." We waited another 20 minutes for my cousin Derek to fly in from California, where he ran a failed startup that Grandpa had refused to bail out. Aunt Nadine came from her yoga retreat in Sedona, still wearing her meditation beads. Second cousins I'd met maybe twice in my life filled the remaining chairs. Everyone pretending to grieve while mentally calculating their percentage of $500 million. Finally, when the room couldn't hold another person, Mr. Quinton cleared his throat. The sound was like a starting pistol. Everyone leaned forward. Mallory angled her phone for a better shot. Uncle Harlan put away his phone. Even my father, who claimed he didn't care about the money, straightened in his chair. I, Cornelius James Ashford, being of sound mind and body, leave my entire estate, valued at approximately $500 million, including all properties, holdings, investments, and liquid assets, to the family member who finds the golden key. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the room exploded into chaos that would tear our family apart before revealing a truth none of us could have imagined. The chaos that erupted in that conference room was nothing compared to what followed in the next few hours. Uncle Harlan was the first to recover from the shock, his face turning from red to purple as he stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. "This is absolutely ridiculous. A treasure hunt? My father built a pharmaceutical empire, not a damn amusement park." Mr. Quinton raised his trembling hands, trying to restore order. "Please, there's more to the will. If I could just continue reading." But nobody was listening. Bryce had already pulled out his laptop, frantically searching for companies that specialized in treasure hunting. Mallory was shrieking to her phone camera about the most insane plot twist ever, while her viewers flooded the comments with theories about where the key might be hidden. Cousin Derek was on his phone with someone, loudly discussing ground-penetrating radar equipment. The second cousins huddled in groups, forming alliances like they were on some reality TV show. My father was the only one who remained seated. He looked at the portrait of Grandpa Cornelius with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Of course he did this," he muttered. "Even in death, Dad had to make everything a lesson." My mother squeezed his shoulder. "Dennis, we should go. This isn't our fight." But I couldn't move. I sat there watching my family transform into something unrecognizable. These were people who had sung Christmas carols together, who had celebrated weddings and birthdays, who had held each other at Grandpa's funeral just 3 days ago. Now they looked at each other like competitors in a race where second place meant nothing. Mr. Quinton finally managed to shout above the noise. "The will states that the search begins immediately." Mr. Ashford left no clues, no maps, no hints. The key could be anywhere in his possession or properties. The only stipulation is that it must be found by a blood relative or someone who married into the Ashford family. "How do we even know this key exists?" Aunt Veronica demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. This could all be some sick joke. Mr. Quinton pulled out a photograph from his briefcase. It showed a simple golden key about 2 inches long, with the number 1408 engraved on it. Mr. Ashford had this photograph taken and notarized 1 week before his death. I can assure you the key exists. Uncle Harlan snatched the photograph, studying it like it might reveal secret coordinates. "It's a safety deposit box key, First National Bank style, from their old boxes. This narrows it down." "No," Bryce corrected, zooming in on his laptop screen where he'd somehow already downloaded the image. "It could be a replica. Grandpa was too smart to make it that easy. This key could be buried anywhere, hidden in any of his properties." The meeting broke up after that, with family members rushing out like they were fleeing a fire. Some headed straight to Grandpa's mansion in Whitefish Bay. Others drove to his office building downtown. Bryce was already on the phone with a private investigation firm, while Mallory pitched the whole situation to her talent agency as a potential reality show. My parents and I were the last to leave the conference room. Mr. Quinton looked exhausted as he packed up his briefcase. "Your grandfather was a complicated man," he said to my father, "but he always spoke highly of you, Dennis. He said you were the only one who chose happiness over money." "Lot of good that does me now," my father replied, but there was no bitterness in his voice, just sadness. We drove home in silence to our small 2-story house in Bayview, a working-class neighborhood that felt like a different planet from Grandpa's world of estates and stock portfolios. The house needed a new roof, the garage door stuck if you didn't lift it just right, and the kitchen still had the same green linoleum from the 1970s. But it was home, and it was ours, paid for without a cent of Ashford money. That night at dinner, while the rest of the family was probably tearing apart Grandpa's properties, we ate my mother's pot roast and tried to pretend everything was normal. But I couldn't stop thinking about Grandpa Cornelius, about all those Sunday visits, when he'd taught me chess and told me stories about building his empire from nothing. He valued loyalty above everything else, I said suddenly, breaking the silence. My parents looked at me. "What made you think of that?" my mother asked. It's just something he always said, that and how money shows people's true character. Maybe that's what this is really about. Not finding the key, but seeing who we really are when $500 million is on the line. I had no idea how right I was, or how much that revelation would cost our family in the coming months. The treasure hunt consumed the Ashford family like a disease. Within 48 hours of the will reading, Uncle Harlan had hired a team of 15 private investigators, each one assigned to research a different aspect of Grandpa's life. They combed through property records, business transactions, travel histories, and even his medical records, looking for any clue about where he might have hidden that golden key. "It's here somewhere," Uncle Harlan declared at an emergency family meeting he'd called at Grandpa's mansion. Dad owned 17 properties across 3 states. The key has to be in one of them. Bryce had taken a different approach. He'd hired a company called Terrestrial Recovery Services, which specialized in finding lost treasures and stolen artwork. They showed up at Grandpa's estate with metal detectors, ground-penetrating radar, and even thermal imaging equipment. I watched from my car one Sunday as they systematically destroyed Grandpa's prized rose garden, scanning every inch of soil for any trace of metal. "Found something," one of them shouted, and Bryce came running like a dog hearing a dinner bell. They dug for an hour only to uncover an old septic tank cap. This scene repeated itself dozens of times over the next few weeks. Every bottle cap, every old nail, every piece of scrap metal became a moment of false hope, followed by crushing disappointment. Mallory had turned the treasure hunt into her full-time content creation job. She posted daily videos titled things like Day 12 of Finding My Inheritance and We Searched Grandpa's Secret Room. Her followers started sending her theories, which ranged from reasonable to completely insane. Someone suggested the key was hidden inside Grandpa's casket, and I had to physically stop Bryce from petitioning to exhume the body. "This is sick," my father said when he heard about it. "Dad's probably rolling in his grave." But the sickness was spreading. Cousin Derek had flown back from California permanently, convinced he could crack the mystery with technology. He'd created a database of every place Grandpa had ever been, cross-referenced with significant dates in his life. "The key will be somewhere meaningful," he insisted, showing me his color-coded spreadsheet. His wedding anniversary, the day he opened his first pharmacy, the day each of us was born. Aunt Nadine had hired a psychic named Madame Zelda, who claimed she could communicate with Grandpa's spirit. They held seances in Grandpa's study, burning sage and asking the spirits to guide them to the key. The psychic kept saying she sensed golden energy in different locations, which led to more holes in walls and floors. The worst part was watching what it did to Uncle Harlan. He'd always been aggressive in business, but now he'd become paranoid. He installed cameras in all of Grandpa's properties, convinced someone in the family had already found the key and was hiding it. He hired people to follow other family members, certain they were searching in secret. "I know Dennis has it," he told anyone who would listen. Dad always had a soft spot for him, even though he was a disappointment. This is probably his way of making sure the weak son inherits everything. My father heard about these accusations but refused to engage. "Let him think what he wants," he told me. "I haven't set foot in Dad's properties since the funeral, and I don't intend to start now." 3 months into the search, the family was in ruins. Bryce had spent over $200,000 of his trust fund on treasure hunters. He'd lost his job at the investment firm because he kept calling in sick to supervise searches. His girlfriend left him when he tried to convince her to invest her savings in more sophisticated detection equipment. Mallory's influencer career was actually thriving from the drama, but she'd become obsessed with being the one to find the key on camera. She'd broken into tears during a live stream when another false lead turned up nothing, and her followers had started a GoFundMe to help her hire her own search team. The extended family had fractured into factions. Some believed the key was hidden in Grandpa's Vermont estate. Others were convinced it was in his office building. A group of second cousins had a theory that the key was hidden in one of the pharmaceutical warehouses. They'd all stopped talking to each other. afraid of giving away any clues they might have discovered. Meanwhile, I kept my Sunday routine. Every week without fail, I drove to Riverside Cemetery and sat by Grandpa's grave. I'd bring fresh flowers, pull the weeds that grew around his headstone, and tell him about the chaos his will had created. "They're destroying everything you built, Grandpa," I said one gray February afternoon, my breath forming clouds in the cold air. "Not the business, but the family. Is this what you wanted? To see who we really are when money's involved?" The only answer was the wind through the bare trees. But somehow, I felt like he was listening, waiting for someone to understand the real lesson he was trying to teach. By month 9 of the treasure hunt, the Ashford family had completely imploded. Uncle Harlan's paranoia had reached dangerous levels. He'd filed lawsuits against 3 family members, accusing them of theft and fraud, claiming they'd found the key and were hiding it. His lawyers had petitioned the court to have Grandpa declared mentally incompetent at the time he wrote the will, arguing that no sound person would structure their estate this way. Bryce had hit rock bottom. After spending nearly $500,000 on treasure hunters, archaeologists, and even a team that had searched for lost Nazi gold, he'd started drinking heavily. His apartment was filled with maps, photographs, and documents about Grandpa's life. He'd covered entire walls with red string connecting different locations and dates, like something out of a detective movie. His ex-girlfriend had called my mother, worried he was having a breakdown. "I know I'm close," Bryce told me when I stopped by to check on him. His eyes were bloodshot, his usually perfect hair unwashed and wild. Grandpa owned a cabin in Michigan that nobody knows about. I found the deed in some old paperwork. That has to be where it is. Mallory's situation was different, but equally disturbing. Her follower count had exploded to over 1 million, and she'd gotten a reality TV deal from a streaming service. But the pressure to find the key on camera was destroying her. She'd started taking anxiety medication, then increased the dose when that wasn't enough. She'd hired actors to create fake discoveries to keep her audience engaged, which backfired when someone recognized one of them from a commercial. The extended family members had exhausted their savings on their own searches. Cousin Derek had maxed out his credit cards buying sophisticated equipment. Aunt Nadine had spent her retirement fund on psychics, mediums, and even a dowsing expert who claimed he could find anything with special rods. My parents watched it all with a mixture of sadness and disgust. "This is exactly what your grandfather was afraid of," my mother said over dinner one night. "He always said money doesn't change people, it reveals them." The anniversary of Grandpa's death was approaching, October 15th. I'd maintained my Sunday visits throughout the entire year, never missing a single week. Rain or shine, snow or heat, I was there. The cemetery groundskeepers knew me by name now. "Back again?" Old Carl would say, tipping his cap as I walked past with my flowers and thermos of coffee. I'd developed a ritual. First, I'd clear away any debris from the headstone. Then, I'd pull the weeds, trim the grass around the edges with hand scissors, and arrange fresh flowers in the permanent vase. While I worked, I'd talk to Grandpa about everything. My job teaching 5th grade at McKinley Elementary. My girlfriend Rachel, who I'd met at a bookstore. The normal life I was building while the rest of the family destroyed themselves. "You know what I realized, Grandpa?" I said one Sunday in early October. "I'm the only one who's visited you this whole year. Uncle Harlan came once to check if the key was hidden in your flowers. Bryce brought his metal detector, but nobody else comes just to visit." The week before the anniversary, I planned something special. I went to Romano's Deli and ordered Grandpa's favorite meal, pastrami on rye with extra mustard and a pickle on the side. I stopped at his favorite coffee shop for their special dark roast blend. And I brought the chess set he'd given me for my 16th birthday, the one with hand-carved jade and ivory pieces that he'd bought on a business trip to Hong Kong. October 15th was a perfect autumn day. The maple trees in the cemetery blazed red and gold, and the air had that crisp quality that made everything feel more alive. I set up the chessboard on top of Grandpa's grave, using the flat surface of the headstone as a table. I played a complete game, moving both black and white pieces, using all the strategies he'd taught me. "Remember the Sicilian defense?" I said, moving the pieces. "You said it was like life, aggressive, but with purpose. You had to be willing to sacrifice pawns to protect your king. But the best players, you said, they knew when to be patient, when to make the quiet moves that nobody notices until checkmate." I finished the game with a pawn promotion, just like Grandpa had taught me. "The weakest piece becoming the strongest," I said, smiling at the memory of his lesson. "That's the beauty of chess, kiddo," he'd said. "Anyone can become powerful if they just keep moving forward." As I packed up the chess set, my hand brushed against something rough under the lip of the headstone. At first, I thought it was just dirt or moss, but when I looked closer, I saw a strip of industrial tape, painted to match the granite so perfectly I'd never noticed it, despite cleaning this spot every week for a year. My heart stopped as I peeled back the industrial tape. There it was, exactly like in the photograph Mr. Quinton had shown us a year ago, a small golden key with 1408 engraved on its surface. It had been here the entire time, weathering 4 seasons of Wisconsin weather, waiting under the very headstone I'd cleaned every Sunday for 12 months. A small laminated note was attached to it. "For my faithful visitor, C.A." I sat back on my heels, the key trembling in my palm. The metal was cold but somehow felt alive, like it was vibrating with the weight of what it represented. $500 million. Enough money to change everything. Enough to never worry about the leaking roof on our house, my father's ancient car, my mother's medical bills from her hip surgery. Enough to pay off my student loans 1,000 times over. But also enough to destroy what was left of our family. I called my parents immediately. My mother answered on the second ring. "I found it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Mom, I found the key." There was silence. Then my father's voice came through the speaker. "Where are you?" "At the cemetery. It was under his headstone. It's been here the whole time." "Don't tell anyone else," my father said urgently. "Come home. We need to think about this." But I couldn't leave, yet. I sat by Grandpa's grave, holding the key, trying to understand what he wanted me to do. The laminated note was clear. He'd known it would be me. For my faithful visitor. He'd counted on my consistency, my loyalty, the fact that I would keep coming even when there seemed to be no point. I drove home in a daze. My parents were waiting in the living room, the curtains drawn. We sat around our scratched coffee table, the key between us like a live grenade. "You could keep it secret," my mother said quietly. "Wait a few more months, then discover it somewhere else." "Or we could call Quinton right now," my father countered, "end this madness before it gets worse." But something was bothering me. "A safety deposit box key," I said, turning it over in my fingers. "Box 1408 at First National, Grandpa's bank. There's something in that box he wanted found." "The money's probably in investment accounts," my father said. "The key is just symbolic." But I knew Grandpa better than that. Every move he made had purpose. The next morning, I put on my only suit and drove to First National Bank's main branch downtown. The building was a monument to old Milwaukee money, all marble and brass and hushed voices. I asked to speak to the manager, showing him the key. Mr. Jacobson, a tall man with silver hair, examined it carefully. "Box 1408, yes, that's one of our oldest boxes. Mr. Ashford had it since 1963. You'll need to show identification and sign the access log." He led me through 3 sets of security doors, each one thicker than the last. The vault was like something from a movie, with hundreds of brass boxes lining the walls. Box 1408 was in the back corner, one of the large floor-level units. I inserted the key with shaking hands and turned it. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed to echo through my entire life. The box was heavier than I expected. I had to use both hands to carry it to the private viewing room. Mr. Jacobson left me alone, closing the door with a soft click. I took a deep breath and opened the lid. The first thing I saw was money. Stacks and stacks of $100 bills, bundled with strips that had dates from the 1960s. There had to be at least $1 million in cash, maybe more. But this wasn't normal money. Each bundle had initials on it, VD and dates, monthly dates going back decades. Under the money was a leather journal, its pages yellow with age. Grandpa's handwriting filled every line, starting with an entry from 1961. I began to read, and my blood turned to ice. Vincent D'Angelo came to my pharmacy today. He knows I've been skimming from the till to pay for Maria's cancer treatment. He says he'll report me to the police unless I help him. I have no choice. My daughter is dying. The entries continued, each one documenting a descent into darkness. Vincent "Vinny Diamonds" D'Angelo, the notorious Milwaukee crime boss, had turned Grandpa's first pharmacy into a money laundering operation. When Vincent supposedly died in 1971, the truth was different. He'd faked his death, and Grandpa had been forced to help him hide, paying him monthly protection money for 50 years. The last item in the box made me reach for my phone to call 911. Recent photographs of Vincent D'Angelo's real grave, dated just 1 month before Grandpa's death, and a USB drive labeled Complete Evidence for the FBI. I sat in that cold bank vault for 20 minutes before I could make my fingers dial 911. When the operator answered, my voice came out steadier than I felt. I need to report a crime. Multiple crimes, actually, going back 60 years. I'm at First National Bank on Wisconsin Avenue. Please send detectives, and you'll need to contact the FBI. Within an hour, the bank was swarming with law enforcement. FBI agents in dark suits, local detectives, forensic accountants, even someone from the Treasury Department. They took the money, the journal, the USB drive, everything. Agent Sarah Coleman, who led the investigation, sat with me for 3 hours as I explained how I'd found the key and what I'd discovered in the box. Your grandfather documented everything, she told me later. Every payment, every threat, every crime Vincent committed while he was supposed to be dead. This is the biggest cold case break we've ever had in Wisconsin. The news broke the next morning. Pharmaceutical billionaire's dark secret, Cornelius Ashford's hidden life of extortion. Every news outlet in the country picked up the story. The FBI revealed that Vincent D'Angelo had faked his death to escape federal prosecution for murder and racketeering. Grandpa had been forced to help him disappear, then paid him protection money for 50 years. The pharmaceutical empire we'd all been so proud of had been built on a foundation of fear. Uncle Harlan collapsed when he heard the news. Not physically, but emotionally. He broke down in tears at the family meeting we held a week later. Dad carried this alone, he kept saying. All those years, and he never told anyone. He protected us from it. Bryce entered rehab voluntarily. Learning that Grandpa had been a victim, not the invincible businessman he'd idolized, somehow gave him permission to admit his own weakness. I spent a year chasing money that was never really ours, he told me during visiting hours. Grandpa would be ashamed of what I became. Mallory deleted all her treasure hunt videos and took a break from social media. She started seeing a therapist and eventually went back to school to become a social worker. I want to help people who are trapped like Grandpa was, she explained. People who feel like they have no way out. The FBI's forensic accountants worked for 3 months to separate the criminal money from Grandpa's legitimate earnings. Even after removing everything connected to Vincent D'Angelo, Grandpa's legal businesses had generated nearly $100 million. He really had been a brilliant businessman, even while carrying the weight of extortion. That's when Mr. Quinton revealed the second will. Grandpa had left it with federal authorities years ago, with instructions to open it only if someone found the key and made what he called the right choice. The will left the clean money to be divided equally among all family members, but with conditions. The person who found the key would serve as executor, and each family member could only receive their share by presenting a plan for how they'd use it to create light from darkness. The family came together for the first time in a year to discuss their plans. Uncle Harlan wanted to fund a legal aid society for small business owners facing extortion. Bryce proposed a foundation for families affected by organized crime. Mallory planned to create a documentary series about victims who fought back against their oppressors. Even the cousins who'd spent everything searching for the key had ideas for charity work, business ventures that would help others, ways to transform our tainted legacy into something good. My parents didn't want their share at first. "We've been fine without Ashford money this long," my father said, but I convinced them to take it and start a scholarship fund for students whose parents chose careers in education over money. "Let Grandpa's money help create more teachers," I said. "More people who choose purpose over profit." As for me, I used my role as executor to ensure everyone followed through on their plans, but I also kept something for myself, the key, not for its monetary value, but as a reminder. I keep it on my desk where I can see it every day. I still visit Grandpa's grave every Sunday. The headstone has been replaced with a new one that includes the truth. Cornelius James Ashford, beloved father and grandfather. He bore his burden with grace and protected those he loved. When I pour coffee on his grave now, I tell him about the good his money is finally doing. The families helped, the students educated, the victims supported. The last time I visited, I brought my own son, born just this month. "This is your great-grandfather," I told him, even though he was too young to understand. He wasn't perfect, but he was strong enough to document the truth, knowing that someday someone would have the courage to reveal it. He taught me that real inheritance isn't money. It's the choice to do what's right, even when it costs everything. If this story touched you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below about a time when you chose truth over comfort, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories every week.